Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Mjolnir the Movies. Now, this week we're going to be looking at the Terminator series of films and the series as well. I think you guys have watched the series, so the whole franchise. And there's a new Terminator film out later this year, so this has coincided quite nicely, as if by magic. I think we'll start off actually with the trailer for the new Terminator film, because that was released a few weeks ago. So what did you make of that then, chaps?
There's a lot of women in there, isn't there?
Oh,
It
yes.
just seems like it's going to be, I know it's going to be another one of these silly liberal feminist pieces of trash that's going to cash in on big tough women. But I think they're missing the point because the first one, Terminator, it's about a strong, powerful woman, but it's not in your face about it. In fact, it's quite subtly done, even in the second one. But this new one, it's just going to be an all-out woman fest. It's going to be like Ghostbusters, but with robots instead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Linda Hamilton was sort of a bit like Sigourney Weaver in a way, wasn't she? I mean, we're going to have a look at the Alien franchise as well in due course, but I think that they're quite similar characters, really, because they started out quite feminine as well as being strong female role models, but now they're really parodies of ultra feminist SJW types, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Ripley and Linda Hamilton's character in Terminator, they weren't scream. They never scream, do they? They don't scream and like put their hands in their hair and make this horrified face. They don't run like up and down like the hallway in their underwear, being chased by the alien or the Terminator. They're strong, and no one cared. No one back then was like, oh, this is a bit unrealistic depicting women as strong. Nobody cared because it was a good movie. It was a good story. But now these new ones are just agendas just driven to make men look like shitbags and women to look like the heroes.
That's right. I think that's one of the major differences in that during the late 70s, early 80s, because of course Alien came out in, what was it, 79, I think?
Yeah, late 70s, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Terminator, the first film, 84. So we're talking around the same sort of era. You didn't get this belittling of men. Women could be strong without belittling men. But now there has been this really strong element of creating Mary Sues who basically are very man-hating and disparaging towards their male counterparts. You get this, of course, in Terminator Genisys. Is it Terminator Genisys? I think it is, where you get Amelia Clarke. We'll get on to that, but certainly, Amelia Clarke plays the same character, Sarah Connor, but there's a big difference between the Sarah Connor that Linda Hamilton played and the Sarah Connor that Amelia Clarke plays. Although I certainly think that you start getting overtones towards the feminist lobby in Terminator 2 already, but we'll come on to that, I think. I don't know if it's just me, but I certainly think that you get this sort of butchness coming in.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed is that I think, and there's a danger here, and I don't want people to like not understand what I'm trying to say here, but this doesn't mean that I hate women or I hate strong women or I hate films about strong women. Quite the opposite. I mean, Terminator and Alien are two of my favorite movies, and they're both, their main characters are female. What I don't like is when we're put in these silly, unrealistic situations where suddenly all the men are all awful, they're conspiring, it's their fault, and it's up to the woman to sort everything out. I mean, that's just demeaning for a start, and it makes fun of us. They put this image out there to make it look like they're doing women a favor in some way, or they're looking out for them, or they're just saying what needs to be said now that we're in a position to do it. And all I'm seeing is just bitterness and resentment there. And I don't like it, especially if I'm being asked to go to a cinema to pay for a ticket to watch it and be told that I'm a shitbag male.
Well, what they do it for, of course, is to drive a wedge between men and women, particularly white men and white women, which are what most of these films are aimed towards. And The reason, of course, in some ways is that you've got very much a liberal elite and very much a Jewish elite running the film companies and so on, who, for whatever reason, detest the idea of the white, stable, traditional family, and they want to do it down. I mean, the thing about the first film is James Cameron, of course, he directs the first film, but it's really before he becomes a shitlib, because he has become a shitlib over time. But you don't get that impression in the first film at all. It seems to be a progression.
There's no roles in the first movie that I would, maybe there's some, maybe I'm just not seeing it, other than the black cop who somebody could argue was supposed to be like a smart, intelligent black guy in authority. You could maybe argue that. But generally, there's nothing overly political in the movie. It doesn't really define Sarah Connor as a strong woman and Arnold Schwarzenegger as the evil robot. It doesn't really define roles like that. I think it's just a film for everybody. But these modern films are not for everyone. They're for one group, and that's females. And they know that, let's be honest here, the Terminator series is not really a series that was designed for women. It was designed for everyone.
It was mainly designed for men.
Well, I would say virgin towards men, but I think anybody could really sit down and watch that and enjoy it. Men more, admittedly. It's robots fighting each other and explosions. I mean, guys like that sort of thing. But these new films, you just know you're not going to enjoy it because it's not being made for you this time.
No, in many ways, it's being made against you.
Yeah.
Which is absolute. It's crazy, really, this fashion, which comes from politics, ultimately. It comes from the politics of the extreme left. But they're pretty much smashing their own faces with a hammer, because ultimately they're going to lose huge revenues because, of course, these are the films that men go to see, not women. Women go to see rom-coms and stuff like that. It's just how it is. It's just what women are more interested in. There's not, I'm not saying anything negative there. All I'm saying is a matter of fact that men gravitate towards the heroic, and so therefore they go to watch action films where they will have this guy who they sort of semi-identify with, the male protagonist. Whereas women will go and they will watch a rom-com because, they're more in tune with feelings and stuff like that. And that's not to say that one's more negative or more positive or whatever. It's just how things are. It's just kind of naturally what the sexes in general gravitate towards, although there are, of course, exceptions, but they are exceptions. And sort of 70-80% of the people follow those kind of rules that I've just set out.
Yeah. Well, generally, as a rule of thumb, women, if you're listening, you're angry. What we're saying is women don't generally enjoy robot movies, generally speaking. So when you have a series of films that was never designed for you in the first place, it was mainly for guys, and now all that's been changed, you kind of feel like you've been robbed, and something that you maybe even care about is just being used against you. And you get this feeling that it's just to piss you off. And that's the feeling I get, especially the Ghostbusters. I mean, when that movie was out, when I was a youngster, and the second one, I remember everybody liked that movie. Everyone loved it. Men, women, whoever. Everybody thought it was funny, it was scary, it was whimsical. But now this new one, it seems as if they're just deliberately taking these things, especially women and in the movie industry and the certain types who we won't mention, who are doing this because they know that they can get a whole bunch of women to fill the cinemas instead of men.
But of course they don't.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, nobody goes to see these. That's the thing that's the backfire here, right? Nobody goes to see them.
Yeah, because I mean, militant feminists and these green-haired lesbians and so on, they're a very small fraction of the population.
Yeah.
And so if that's who you're marketing your films towards, you're on a loser.
Yeah.
And this can be quantified because we've seen how these films have bombed, particularly Ghostbusters and so on, which is probably the worst example in recent years of a feminist film.
Yeah.
So
too much politics again.
Yeah, that's right. Too much politics again. They want to sort of fight against the grain. This is the thing about leftist politics, is they're always fighting against nature, and that can be seen in the fact that people are turned off these films.
And there's also the element with these films where they make something that's a big hit because it happens to resonate greatly with a particular segment, but then somebody has the great idea of, we can just broaden the appeal and market this to everyone, all demographics, and then it becomes all nations. And so you end up with this watered down, inoffensive gruel that somehow fits everybody but really doesn't please anybody because it's not tailored to them anymore.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
It's a one-size-fits-nobody film.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a Chinese takeaway. I suppose everybody would enjoy it. But half an hour later, you're just fucking hungry again, aren't you? You just don't feel like you've been nourished in any way, and you just devour crap.
And about half
Like
a
a
pound
seagull or
of
something like
monosodium
that.
glutamate.
Yeah, seagull curry and rice. I mean, that's what you'd be eating. Just the same as this crap they're churning out. You watch it and you're like, why the fuck did I watch it? I knew it was going to be bad. It's only till after you watch it.
Yeah. So coming back sort of towards the first installment in this whole franchise then, which is proper Terminator, the Terminator as it's called, with a "the" at the beginning of the title. What makes this film so good for you, Neil? Because I mean, this is your choice to look at this. So because you see, in some ways I can see why this is a groundbreaking film. In other ways, looking back on it, it seems quite a run-of-the-mill sci-fi action film.
I think the reason I liked it, because when I was a kid, I was a massive fan of Halloween and Michael Myers. And I was also a fan of another film called Westworld, which James Cameron was involved in.
Oh,
And
was it? I didn't know.
Yeah, he was involved in. James Cameron was involved with the special effects on Westworld. I see some of the effects where you see the reflection in the sunglasses as they're whizzing in the sort of space tram across the desert. Apparently, he designed all that stuff, and he designed the special effects in Escape from New York, some of them. So that's why I kind of got interested in Terminator, because I was a kid and I wanted a bit of both. I wanted a robotic Michael Myers. And in many ways, the Terminator fit that bill that I needed. And he very much is Michael Myers. When you first see Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in the movie, he's this sort of young guy. He's buff. He's obviously muscly. His hair's all nice and trimmed, and he's smiling. He's got this kind of shy smile when he asks the punks, your clothes, give them to me. And throughout the duration of the film, you see that character. His hair gets singed. He gets shot a few times. He loses one of his eyes. And towards the end of the movie, when his skin's still on, it's partially rotting, and there's flies crawling on him. And I like the development of that character, how it started off as being this American football player developing into this monster who effectively was a robotic zombie. It was like Night of the Living Dead, but with time travel, and a killer robot in Westworld and Michael Myers all in one movie. And I just think it's fantastic.
I must point out that that's not an American football player at all, but the Styrian oak that is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. and I know Arnie's a bit of a hammy actor, and he's like a bit of a joke actor, if I'm honest with you. Hey, he's been in a few good films, but I think this was the film where his acting stands out above all of them, because you really do think that guy's a robot, but not really a robot. He's not like your archetypal movie robot, moving his arms and doing the robot dance. He looks like a real person, but at the same time, he's not. And I think his acting in this movie is seriously underrated.
I remember that the British film critic Barry Norman, who you may remember, was on Film, whatever year it was, Film 89 and so on. It would have been Film 84 in this case. He said that Arnold Schwarzenegger was not an actor, he was a special effect. Which has got a certain amount of truth to it, actually. But I don't think that he's a great actor, but I think that he's good at what he does. I think
his range isn't amazing.
No, but he realizes that, and so always finds films that he's suited for, and that's quite clever, actually.
I thought when you see the way he does the sort of quiet menace in various scenes, and as it goes on, it comes through the screen perfectly. I think very few people could have done it the same way he could have done. Even skilled veteran actors wouldn't have been as convincing as him. Partly it's obviously just the immense size of him. That is obviously a deliberate choice for the character to give him that presence, but also his face and the way he moves. I've got to give him credit there. It's really well done.
And if you consider Lance Henriksen, apparently he was going to be the Terminator originally. And when he came in for the audition, apparently he came in dressed as a Terminator would be after one of the battles, and he had like tinfoil on his face and he had blood and stuff, and he came in like the Terminator. But when Arnie applied for the job, they thought, well, he's much more terrifying, he's bigger, he's more muscly, and he was fresh off, what was it he'd done just before that? Was it Was it Conan just before
I
that?
think
Or was
Conan
that
was
just
82,
after?
was it? 81, 82?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Conan
So
was
he's-
82. Yeah.
So he must have been a pretty big thing back then, way bigger than Lance Henriksen. But in many ways, I think sometimes, if they'd gone with Lance Henriksen, that would have been a much scarier movie.
Hadn't Henriksen already been in Near Dark at that point?
That was after. I think
Oh, was it after?
Yeah,
Okay.
Catherine Bigelow directed that, who I think was married to James Cameron at the time.
Hmm.
And she's actually a very good director. She's directed a few good movies. But yeah, Near Dark's got Lance Henriksen. It's got the girl from Aliens, the sort of Mexican woman that looks like the man.
Hmm.
What's his name? The guy that died recently, whose name I've completely forgotten. He's on Titanic. He's a punk in Terminator as well.
Oh, I can't remember.
I know the one you mean. He was an alien. It's the Game Over guy.
Yeah. God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name.
Folk at home will be screeching at the screen.
Unsubscribing in mass.
That's it. Yeah. We do like him. We just can't remember his name.
Yeah, it wasn't Billy Zane, was it?
It's Bill something. Bill Paxton.
That's it. Hey.
Yeah, he was in Independence Day as well, wasn't he?
Was Bill Paxton in Independence Day? Was he?
Didn't he play the president?
That's Bill Pullman.
Getting Bills mixed up now.
Getting the Bills mixed up.
Yeah. Well, at least I didn't get him mixed up with Bill Cosby anyway.
Oh dear. Getting you fitted out for the white stick if you did.
That's right. Yeah, so, I mean, I get why The Terminator is a great film, because it does indeed have elements of Halloween and such like in it.
And a lot of the old mythology with demons and stuff. You think Arnie's essentially following these old stories of demons and supernatural creatures that wear human skin. It's following that kind of mythology, and it has to use the mask of human to come through to our world. You could sort of see the supernatural just stories transferred to a sci-fi form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you think, though, it's got an extremely simplistic plot to it and so on, hasn't it?
But it's not a bad thing, because then it lets you concentrate on what's there. It also lets your imagination work on the story, which is where I think this one got it right. The future, I actually think they made a mistake even telling you as much about the future setting as they did. I think they should have just had Kyle Reese's flashbacks in the dream, because that's unreliable because it's a dream, and what he said to Sarah Connor, and that I would have just left it at that. I wouldn't have opened up with the role of the hellscape. I would have put that in as a dream sequence, and I'd have left it mysterious whether or not Kyle Reese was a good or bad guy until the tech noir shootout, and it would have been much more interesting.
That'd be
right.
More like a murder mystery, though. That would, if you'd have to reveal Arnie.
Yeah, you'd have Arnie and all the rest of it, but you wouldn't know if Kyle was on her side or not until the shootout. Because all you'd see is a guy stealing guns off of cops, on the run. He seems like a druggie or whatever, and then suddenly he would come out and you would get the story sort of explained to you through his actions, rather than just deliver him right from the start as this heroic figure that drops in.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think though that the beginning actually gets your attention quite a lot, because it's this sort of dystopian future warscape, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a hard call. I mean, I couldn't criticise Cameron's probably most famous work and claim to do better, but I just thought it'd be an interesting spin if they did it that way. But certainly, I think the hellscape they show in the first one is actually better than anything they showed in any of the others. Much better. That action sequence with them fighting against it was better and more believable, and the robots were terrifying. The way they just sprayed lasers about, and it was more convincing that they would use these huge tank-tracked monsters to fight folk. All of it felt really good.
Yeah, I think as well, because it doesn't rely on CGI, and some of the CGI, as we've talked about before, from sort of early 2000s is dated really badly. But
also
here, because it's models.
Yeah, it imposed limits upon them, and I think sometimes a limit is a good thing for an artist.
Yeah, although there are some extremely dodgy special effects in there. And that surprised me, Neil, what you said about James Cameron having been involved in the special effects on Westworld, because they're pretty good special effects, actually. But in this, I can't believe that he let that awful special effect go of the prosthetic head of Arnold Schwarzenegger when, he has his eye sort of ripped away to reveal the machine behind it.
And he didn't need that
And
part.
that is awful.
He could have got away without that at all, because you had the really uncomfortable scene where the actor is taking his eye out from the side, and you see the blood drops in the sink, which is really good storytelling and cinematography there, the drops, and then the eye drops in, and then you see this full head shot, and they actually use that head later on as well. I think it was the
He's
landlord.
got flies in his face. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see this really horrible robot head, and it's so obvious.
Yeah, without trying to defend the movie too much, because I know that the special effect was just a really bad special effect. But I wonder, because Kyle Reese says something in the movie that some of the models were easier to spot than others. So I'm wondering if James Cameron was trying to show that when the metal is exposed in these beings, or when the wires are exposed in some way, maybe we can see them differently, and we can see them for what they actually are. And maybe these things can blend in. But I know it's just a bad special effect, but I was wondering if some of those things were deliberately done to show that this guy is actually a robot with some prosthetic skin on him, effectively. Because he does look too human at points, and you can tell that's a real guy. There's no way that's a robot. Until you see the special effects, then you go, oh, wait a minute, he looks more like a robot now, though.
One of the things that stood out to me when watching this back-to-back with the other ones, the first film, and only the first film, did this. If you look at Arnie's face and his makeup and the way the light hits it, it's the only one that shows him looking greasy, sweaty, and kind of horrible skin and pale. You know, like like he's unhealthy. Every other one, even when he's shot up and half his face off, like in Terminator 3 near the end, half his face off, but the rest looks all beautifully done up with makeup and healthy, glowing skin, like he's just come off a holiday.
Yeah, but and like I said, in the first one, even when he's one of the creepiest scenes, when he gets in the truck and he looks at the driver, he's like, "Get out," and you see his face, and he's all like pasty and nasty looking.
Yeah, it's the only one that did
the second one, he even has like the $1 million smile throughout the movie. I mean, he looks like just a guy with some makeup, some bloody makeup on. When in the first film, he actually looks like he's been damaged and like he's rotting, and his outer flesh is rotting and coming to an end. But yeah, and then his hair's pristine as well in the second one.
Yeah, and in chase scenes and stuff, when you see Arnie driving the car as the Terminator, you know, in sort of middle of the film later on, you see this horrible pastiness, you know, the clammy skin, and of course everyone else is done up as Hollywood style, so it makes him stand out even more. The fact that he's got this sort of unhealthy look about him, which is great because it adds to his menace. You know, it makes him stand out, look sinister and strange. And then in the new films, you get this perfect Hollywood makeup at all times, no matter how badly hurt he is.
Yeah.
It's actually less realistic, less menacing.
I think by the time they got to Terminator 2, Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably, after Terminator 2, seen as a bad guy in terms of movies. He's the actor that could play a really good bad guy. But let's be honest, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the majority of his characters are heroic and good. So by the time they got to Terminator 2, they'd had Predator, Running Man. They had what's the other one? Running Man. Commando. Yeah, all these films which made Arnie look like a good guy. So they couldn't make Terminator 2 always make Arnie bad again, because Hollywood, as far as they were concerned, Arnie was a good guy.
Yeah, but going back to what you said about the special effects, I'm not convinced really, because as soon as he puts his shades on, you know, when he puts those sunglasses back on, suddenly he's back to how he was, his face.
That was the thing, though, because he then covers up the metal part with the glasses, and he's back to normal. No one will recognize him. And apparently so, no one does recognize him or notice that he's got a big gaping wound in his head, or that his hair's all been burnt off. For some reason, no cops notice him. Nobody seems to notice there's something dodgy with this guy.
No, but if you see, it's the actual flesh-looking prosthetics that are the problem, not really the machine part.
Yeah, I think it was just a bad prosthetic. But I do think that part of them, they had to make the audience realize that Arnie's character is not human. They had to show some robotic element in it.
The arm was great, though. They could have just stuck with that. When they showed it, it looked really convincing, the hand moving. That was fine. And they also had the side-on shot where it removes the eye. They could have had that done, and then maybe just with makeup alone, which they did show, because they showed him walking in with a busted-up eye and things. It was quite horrific. They could have done that with just a bit of makeup, maybe even as he sort of puts the shades on, show a glint of metal, and it would have been great. Just sort of subtly do it rather than try and do something ambitious that's going to fail and drag it down, especially after the really good hand part, which, looking at it now, you can tell how it's done, but that was convincing enough, certainly at the time. But as Dave said, the robot head, even at the time, even years ago, that was... You looked at it, you thought, that's no Arnie, that's a rubber mask thing.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I always thought he looked a little bit like Michael Myers. He looked like a Michael Myers mask.
It does, with the rubber version does.
Yeah. I was like, that's not Michael Myers. Because it really does look like it. You can imagine it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we come on to Terminator 2, which is about, 7 years later, isn't it? It was released. The effects have certainly improved here. Unfortunately, the film itself has got worse.
Like typical James Cameron. He writes a half good story, or it's half a script, and gets told he's going to get $200 million to make it. And he just starts writing special effect here, special effect there, explosion there, giant monster here, sinking ship here.
Yeah.
Fuck the storyline.
Well, this is the problem with budgets.
But he still does have some of the biggest grossing films of all time, does David? I nearly said David Cameron there. That's a completely different ship lib. But James Cameron, he certainly has quite a lot of box office successes, it has to be said.
Oh, he knows how to get people into the cinemas, that's for sure.
And perhaps this is sadly a reflection of the cinema-going audience, in that basically that's what they want, something extremely simplistic and easy-pleasy.
I think Avatar is the most overrated movie of all time. I do not see why that is such a famous movie. And I think he's making another 3 over the next 10 years, because it's going to take that long to make each one.
Well, it's just a remake. It's just a remake of that kids' film. Was it Legend of Fern Gully? Except they've just did it up with CGI.
Yeah, Fern Gully with blue fucking monkeys.
Yeah, instead of the fairies.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, that's what it's about.
It's a bloody awful film, to be quite honest, is Avatar, both on a political and a film-making perspective. Because it's just a cartoon, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I can't even remember what it's about. I just know these blue things get oppressed by these giant robots that are controlled by white people.
the space Nazis.
Who's being saved by a guy who can't walk anymore because he's a quadriplegic or something like that. I'm thinking, what a lot of shit this is.
That's right. You've got post-colonialism in there. You've got disableism. You've got feminism.
You've got him identifying with another species and turning against his own. And remember, in the Avatar films, they're desperately searching for a new home and resources for for the human species to survive. Is the setting, and he turns against his own.
I think what he's doing as well, he's also been, if you think about it, he's been a bit racist himself, because what he's saying is, see, you black people, these blue people, they're actually you. That's what I'm saying, or that's what I'm making a point of here. I'm defending you guys, and I'm going to make them look blue instead, and give them tails, and they can go flying around the jungles. That's basically what he's saying.
Yeah, but we'll do Avatar another time. I think it's actually it's the 10th anniversary this year, isn't it? Of the release of Avatar. Yeah. So we'll do that one in a future podcast, because I think there's some interesting things in it, especially the subversive stuff. But anyway, coming back to Terminator 2. Terminator 2 for me, it was a big event. I remember when it came out.
It's huge.
Yeah, absolutely huge, because you got Guns N' Roses as well, providing the soundtrack. You could be mine and all that.
I don't think Axl Rose's got anything to worry about there.
I think our Axl should be worried about pretty much every singer.
Yeah.
who's decent. Apparently he's doing the lead for AC/DC now, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah, he is.
No, bloody
if he fucking remembers to go on stage. The first fucking fan that shouts anything negative, he's going to walk off stage like he always does. Oh, he's famous for it. Anyway.
Oh, dear.
They done the music for Terminator 2, which back then was a big thing, because they were huge back then.
That's right. I mean, they were one of the... It's hard to imagine now, because they've long since faded. Their star has long since fallen. But back in 1991, they were one of the biggest bands in the world. And riding on the crest of a wave after Appetite for Destruction, GNR Lies, and all that lot. And it was about the time of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, if I remember rightly. But and this helped to sell the film, because all these things work together. Of course, the music video, which was taken from excerpts of the film and the band singing along and so on. And that helped to sell the film, and the film helped to sell the music and so on. So all these things sort of work together, just like merchandising works as well. The films, they help to sell the merchandising, but the merchandising also helped to sell the films. So like E.T. and Star Wars and things like that. It's they all work in sort of little circles and so on.
I mean, I wouldn't imagine, like, if you think about it, the first Terminator was a sci-fi horror movie, and I very much doubt it would have sold many lunchboxes. But I'm pretty sure that Terminator probably sold millions of pounds worth of lunchboxes with Arnie's face on it after Terminator 2. So it went from a horror movie that people were scared to watch to being something that sold toy figures, lunchboxes, and, I don't know, posters for their bedrooms.
Yeah, it's a huge tonal shift from the first. The first was something completely inappropriate for kids. It was a thriller, horror type film and feel. And then the second one, you suddenly had the plucky kid come in, another horrible stereotype. You always know a film series is going bad when you start getting a plucky kid. It was the same in Mad Max. As soon as you get plucky kids come in, it's time to flush the series. Well, that happened in T2 as well, where you had this plucky kid. You had the robot becoming humanized and sort of a comedy figure in a lot of it.
Robot Dad.
Yep. I remember there was a lot of the toys and inappropriate stuff from this tonal shift, which shows the betrayal, really, of the whole point of the series. If they were going to do another Terminator, it really should have been in the tone of the first one. But it was all about money, and I suppose if they wanted a money machine, they got one. I can't say that they didn't get one or failed in that aspect. But they failed in making something as groundbreaking and great as the first, despite the budget and tremendous effects.
Yeah, then they added, it was too sentimental for me. I mean, I appreciate it was a big movie, and some of the fight scenes are really good, granted, and some of the special effects are outstanding, but...
I know now why you cry.
Yeah, and even when the robot, Robert Patrick, when he waves his finger and he's like, no, no, no. It's like, no, you're a robot. You wouldn't do that. You're not going to have emotional fucking fun with the people you're about to kill. Yeah. And it was too slapstick.
Which the first didn't have. The first just made him this remorseless killing machine.
Yeah.
That was what's good about it.
Kicks down doors and he shoots you. He doesn't like walk in and pretend to be someone else. Just fucking walk in and kill. You got knives for hands. You don't have to take permission of anybody.
Yeah, and if you notice, then throughout the franchise after this, the robots seem to have more and more emotion. Yeah. Which is weird.
Yeah.
In the third one, it was even worse still. Even with the Terminatrix, they made that one have all these obvious emotions, and when it's injured, it suffers and struggles.
Yeah, it's very odd that, and you get this female robot, which is obviously again aimed at the feminist lobby. This spiel that Arnie gives. She's a superior model, and so on. And you just know that this is sort of a little nod towards feminism and everything, and that the robot doesn't really represent a robot at all, but sort of a feminist human.
Yeah.
And the third one brought in even more shameless commercialization. Right at the start, when Arnie gets all his outfit, he looks at a watch and his computer calculates that the watch he's wearing is very accurate because it was a product placement.
Oh God, they didn't do that, did they?
It's actually that's still in it. If you get it on DVD or whatever, they actually looks at this watch and you see his overlay, the red overlay, looking at the watch and examining it as accurate, as if a Terminator doesn't have a built-in clock in its skull somewhere. They forgot that feature when they built his operating system, a clock. Yeah. So he has to have his wristwatch from the product placement.
Just like in the first one, when the Terminator, he actually carries around the notepad. Like, you're a fucking Terminator. You don't need a notepad. You got a memory bank. He carries a notepad with the addresses on it. I said, surely you would have some kind of memory bank. You know, carry a notebook around.
A print screen button?
Yeah. Think about that. That whole time that Terminator was chasing Sarah Connor, in the truck, through well, maybe not when he's an actual skeletal model, but the entire time he's carrying around a notebook. Think about that, folks, the next time you watch Terminator.
At least
a notebook of addresses in his front pocket.
You could imagine that he just needs the opportunity to flick through and it would be memorised, surely, the first glance.
Yeah. Oh, what page is that on again? I'm flicking through it. Come on.
Have you never heard of robot Alzheimer's before?
I know.
Is it time travel brings it on?
Yeah.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Time travel, also bad script writing, that also brings it on.
I mean, imagine he forgot the notebook and he had to go back to the hotel and get it again.
Now, I'm going to do Robert Patrick a bit of a good service here. I think that actually is the one saving grace of that film, because I think that irrespective of the script that is dealt up and so on, he does actually play a very good part and is very menacing in it.
Well, he's a very good actor in that.
Absolutely.
Like I said, the fight scenes and the action scenes in that movie were fantastic. The script, his character didn't make any sense either. Why does he look a specific way? Why does he always have to have this cop uniform on? Why does he have to act so carefully? If he's a molten metal robot and he can morph into anything, then why doesn't he just continuously walk about as something else? Why the cop uniform?
Yeah. Well, let's face it, if he actually had the abilities he obviously has, none of them would have survived for real. He could have just slithered along across the floor and then shot spikes up from the floor and they'd all been dead. He wouldn't need to walk into the room looking like the cop they all recognise and menacingly walk towards him. You just slither across a wall on the surface or the floor or wait for them in a stairwell and just swallow them up instantly.
I understand that, but I think there must be a reason why they chose to make him look like a cop the entire time.
Because I suppose the actor had to have his look, and he got his look at the start, so they had to establish that he got his appearance from the cop, and therefore the clothes, and so he just stuck with that. And of course, it meant that he could have the same actor through the whole piece.
I suppose. Maybe
it's not logical. It's one of these things you've got to tune out, suspend your disbelief.
But he does get shot a lot. Was James Cameron trying to say something? Because he likes shooting cops. He likes cops getting shot. Like then everyone in that police station in the first movie gets killed. I was wondering if there's something in there.
Well, leftists, of course, they don't like cops at all, do they? So it's same with Quentin Tarantino. He hates cops as well. He likes to see them get shot and tortured and so on. So I think that's definitely a theme, and it's about the same time as Reservoir Dogs. Actually, thinking about it, Reservoir Dogs is a year later, 92. So I think there's a theme going on there in all these directors that basically it's okay to kill cops.
Yeah, because he gets shot a lot. Now, remember the scene towards the end of Terminator 2 where Arnie's up in the office window and he's got this big Gatling gun or something and he's shooting all the cop cars, but nobody gets injured. But this guy who's constantly dressed like a cop is continuously getting shot and ripped apart and beaten up and thrown about. And I just think to myself, is this because acceptable violence on a cop? Because he's actually a robot? It doesn't really matter.
I don't know. Is it just me, or when the T-1000 gets shot, does it not look like they've just stuck on one of those foil pie dishes? You know what I mean?
Apparently. If you watch the making, they have got those little aluminium like things. They just
they just stuck them on?
Yeah. It looks great though. It looks fantastic.
It does, but at the time I could remember thinking when I first saw it, that looks like pie dishes stuck to him, and I was never sure if it was CGI or it really was foil just stuck to him, or
whether or not there was a Bakewell tart in that at one point.
That's what I was wondering. Was it a steak pie or a Bakewell tart in there? Yeah. Someone's just come from the canteen and said, sod it, that'll do, stick that on him.
Yeah. James Cameron obviously gave that the thumbs up and said, yeah, it looks all right, actually. Yeah.
They said that about the dodgy robot head as well, didn't they? So
I suppose, yeah. Yeah.
To be honest, it might have been sort of some way to try to attract his victims, offering pies and tarts and so on. I don't know.
He'd heard about the gingerbread house, so he thought, right, steak pies and Bakewells, anyone?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that bothers me as well. So going on to this molten metal robot that they have in Terminator 2 and then beyond, Why is it always this fucking really shitty version of the Terminator that they end up reprogramming and sending back? Why don't they ever reprogram one of the new models?
Nostalgia sells more movies.
It's because eBay's late with delivery. You know what it's like. You're stuck with the old model. You know, you put in your order months ago. Then Judgment Day happens. You just can't get the deliveries anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
Says it's stuck somewhere in China. You're going, oh God, that's 2 weeks I've been waiting. I could have just bought it from UK seller instead. Saved a lot of time.
I mean, can you imagine these resistance guys? And one guy says, "Right, what we need to do is capture one of the latest models," and the other go, "No, no, 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 no. We want the really crappy old model because, like, that will be one of the, we like the old models. We're used to the old models.
I know what it is. What's happened is a whole bunch of the vintage video game nerds survived the war, and so they love all the old tech. You know, they've got their Nintendo Entertainment System, their full Genisys collection, and so on. And they thought, no, we love these old model robots. They're really cool. And they've got it on a T-shirt, and they've got the Nintendo Switch soy boy smile as they send them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all probably in the back there playing the Atari Telly game and so on.
Don't want any of that modern rubbish.
That's right. Yeah. Playing R-Type on the arcade game in the back there. All right, we got to go and fight the Terminators now. Okay, I'll just finish my game.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's one bugbear I have about the whole series, and the other thing is that Terminator 3 is pretty much a carbon copy of Terminator 2 as well, isn't it?
Yeah, except shittier in every way.
Yeah, and with a woman Terminator.
Really
so basically, Robert Patrick is just replaced by this Swedish bird. Kristen something or other her name is.
Kristana Loken.
That's right. Yeah, Loken. Yeah. That's it. So
I think that was a breakthrough into big fame. Was this film?
Yeah, and there've been people who've actually looked at this shot for shot, and it's directed in the same way as well. So you can actually compare it scene for scene. And it's pretty much, just ripped off, rather like, of course, J.J. Abrams, Jar Jar Abrams did with Episode 7 of the Star Wars franchise, Disney Wars, and he ripped off the old Death Star and everything and made it into a death planet and so on, all that kind of crap. So it just shows you that they have no new ideas whatsoever, and they're just creating carbon copies with a bit more feminism thrown in.
A spiral.
The only thing I remember about that movie is towards the end, the plane that lands, and it lands and stops suddenly, and the people flying the plane jump out and like run into the cave, the underground factory or plant or whatever the hell it's supposed to be. But remember that scene where the plane lands and it just lands suddenly and it puts its brakes on? I think they actually added that scene in and let it stay in. They didn't realize that planes do not stop suddenly like that when you land.
Right up at the mountain, wasn't it?
It's not like a car he slammed the brake on.
It was one of those wee light aircraft as well. It just sort of comes to a halt, and you even see it kind of tilt forward as if somebody's pulled in a rope behind it.
Put the handbrake on.
Yeah, I mean, that's an inadvertent comedy moment. You do get some really campy, deliberate comedy moments in that film as well, though, don't you, in T3?
Yeah, it's actually far worse for the camp comedy. It took all the bad from Terminator 2 and just upped it every single step of the way.
You get the scene, I think it was it was deleted out of the original version, but then brought back in the director's cut, where you have Arnold Schwarzenegger as the soldier with this really weird southern accent. Who's the model for the Terminator and so on. And he's this very odd, weird character. And it's a very strange, campy moment. What was all that about?
I had no idea what they were thinking, but the fact that it even got shot shows you the kind of mindset they were in. And although it wasn't put in the very final cut, it still perfectly fits the rest of the dross that they did include.
Yeah, and
also that things like the characters the way they change. I mean, the first film was great because you had Sarah Connor as a complete sort of every woman, average person, and you see how she sort of comes to terms with the situation. At first, understandably not believing it and confused, and then later on, she starts to get to grips with it, and you see a sort of change around when she does the first aid on Kyle Reese and he compliments her work. You know, you start to see that's her coming round under pressure. But in this one, you've got the Kate Brewster character, who's the future wife of John Connor. Her fiancé has just been brutally murdered, and literally within hours, she's making moon eyes at John Connor. I think, wow, that fiancé, you know, from the grave, he must be thinking, what a bitch. My body's barely cold, and she's already shacking up with somebody else.
There's a lot of things like that in this series. So, I mean, I was thinking about it watching Terminator the other day, just for reference. I'm thinking, when Kyle Reese was having sex with Sarah Connor, did he realize at any point during that encounter that he was the father of John Connor? Did anything click in his mind?
I think the way they portray it is he's so wrapped up in his mission and so on. It's believable it never twigged. You know, it was a thing in the moment, the heat of the passion, so on. And obviously, later on, they kind of imply that John Connor knew but didn't say. But that all came later. So if we take the film on its own, at least you can say Kyle Reese had no idea.
I mean, that's the thing with time travel movies. They're just riddled with these questions that just don't sit right.
You can get away with it when you keep it simple and once, but the trouble is when you start making sequels and adding to it, every time you add to it, you're like squaring the complexity and the confusing contradictions. I found some diagrams of the timeline for the Terminator, and it's an absolute mess. Every time I've seen one, you know, you've got lines jumping back and forth in time, and you got this cancels that out, and on it goes. You think that illustration told me there should have been nothing added to this.
Yeah.
They could have made another film about another sci-fi situation and it would have been fine, but instead they've got this thing about sequels and they've got to keep building on top of the before, and because it involves all this time travel and every time they do it they try and close it up at the end and then they've got to reopen it, so you end up with another mess. Like Terminator 2, there's a deleted ending which was actually really good, and the one it should have been, because it would have meant there was no more films. But it gave a good closure. And they could have ended it with number 2 even as it was. But instead, you know, the money had to keep flowing because Hollywood has so few ideas. They got to milk everything.
Yeah,
and
we might need a sequel in 10 years' time.
Yeah, this is what will happen. And T3 was rubbish, but it made money because of the name and the advertising. And the same with the others. Although the fans and the reputation, as they do, as they milk it, it goes right down and down and down. And these just get worse and worse as it went on. Absolute garbage.
Yeah, it's exactly the same with the Alien franchise as well.
Yeah. Oh, Alien 4 and stuff like that. Oh, awful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what did... I mean, there are some little things I think are satisfactory in Terminator 2. And that's where Sarah Connor starts out in a mental hospital and so on. And that's actually quite reasonable because it taps into all that conspiracy theory malarkey and so on, where things that happen and people who see stuff happen often get then dismissed as conspiracy theorists and so on. And certainly that idea comes back in Terminator 5 Genisys with this guy who gets rescued by Kyle Reese and the T-800, the guy who arrests Kyle Reese in the department store, and then he comes back later as an older guy when they go into the future, and he's been, trying to convince people about what happened in 1984. So that theme comes back again of the conspiracy theorist and so on. I think it's quite a good little theme that they explored. And in a way, it saves the Terminator 2 film, certainly.
It also gave a good sequence explaining why Sarah had changed so much. They didn't just have her becoming this hard woman overnight. They showed that she'd obviously spent a long time exercising, training, gathering her thoughts and so on, getting contacts.
That's right, yeah.
So that was a good element too.
Yeah, absolutely right. And she always seems a bit unhinged throughout the film.
Which is not unrealistic when you think what she's been through.
That's right.
I mean,
but
she would
it
come
also
across.
stops. Yeah, it also stops her, I think, from being a Mary Sue.
Because she comes across, even the characters comment how overly intense she is with her stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And she becomes quite overbearing and this terrible mother figure of, Jungian philosophy and so on.
Which that's
in
an
a way.
interesting aspect where you have her realise that she's given up a lot of her feminine character and duties, and so she ends up sort of stepping back from that, a bit back towards her nature and humanity again. Because you see, of course, the scene with her going into the home of Dyson, acting just like the machine, and you see the kid obviously lamenting not having a loving mother.
Yeah, absolutely. And she becomes sort of this nice little old grandmother lady, of course, in the alternative ending to Terminator 2. I certainly like that ending because if you look in that park where she's sitting on the bench, there are very few black people. There are lots of white children around. There's no race mixing whatsoever as well. It's a wonderful ending. It's probably why it was scrapped.
And it's the only one that gives that for our future in the series.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's all downhill from here.
Yeah, and so I think that we ought to look at the difference between the Sarah Connor of the fourth film and the Sarah Connor of the first two films, because of course she's played by a different actress.
You mean I'm going to say that the fourth one or the fifth?
Oh yeah,
the fourth one.
That's true. Yeah, no, the fourth one. Yeah, no, I'll come back to that. Yeah,
because I've got notes on this one, Dave. I've got notes.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I've missed one out. Yes.
Everyone wanted to miss that one out, Dave. Everyone did. But I had to watch this film for this discussion, so we're going to talk about it at some point.
That's right. Actually, this film is quite original, in fairness. It's talking about Terminator 4 here.
Oh, no. We're going on to 5 first. If I'm going to start on 4, I'm not going to stop. So we're going on to 5 smoothly, and we'll come back to 4, as you said.
Okay, right. So I'll go back to Sarah Connor then, and Emilia Clarke's Sarah Connor. Now, Emilia Clarke seems to want to play every single Mary Sue there is that is produced by Jollywood at the moment, doesn't she?
And she's not convincing. She's nowhere near as good as the Sarah Connor in T1 or T2. And she also she's so tiny, she has no physical presence either. The one in Terminator 2, she actually looked like she could scare somebody. When you saw her doing her attack on Dyson's home, she looked intimidating. She looked like she'd gone down that kind of psychopathic route of a hardened killer. But Emilia Clarke is unconvincing all the way.
She's just like one of these actresses who is badass because she's got dragons in the Game of Thrones show. And that's the only reason she's badass. And everybody knows she's a badass now, when in actual fact she's just a normal little woman.
I think the other trouble with her is she's one of these actresses, and you get it the same with the male actor, I'm not being unfair, one of these actors that just plays themselves. Yeah. Every single role I've seen her in, she seems exactly the same. Her voice, her mannerisms, her inflections in her voice, it just seems like she's playing herself and reading off the lines.
She's not playing herself, she's playing a role that she would like to be in real life, just like Tom Cruise does in every single film.
But it's a one-hit wonder. It's only one note she can play.
That's right. It's the same in Rogue One. Exactly the same character.
That's right. She's in that as well.
Yeah. Main character in that. Yeah, she's become this typecast figure of the Mary Sue in every single role that she plays now. And there are a number of them as well. They seem to roll them off a conveyor belt these days. That girl who plays Katniss Everdeen, she's the same as well. And I've forgotten her name.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence, that's right. And then there's Daisy Ridley as well. And actually, all three of them are pretty much interchangeable, if you notice. So there is this concerted effort to create this character over and over again in these various different films, but they're exactly the same, even though they're played by different actresses. But the three actresses look very similar, if you notice.
Yeah.
And they have very plasticky, expressionless faces as well.
They're just like robots, aren't they? Really, just like the Terminator movies. But they're probably more human than fucking that actress.
Probably had Arnie displaying more emotion in this film than you did
Yeah.
Amelia Clark.
You got to like really wonder when Arnie's the best actor in your movie.
Do you know what's good about Linda Hamilton as well as the proper Sarah Connor? In the first film, she looks very ordinary.
Hey, she's a plain Jane.
She's a plain Jane. She's an every woman. She's a waitress, of course, in that film. And then in the second film, she's not pretty.
Yeah. She's not very attractive at all, is she?
That's right. And she's obviously worked out to the point where she's quite muscular and not feminine looking. And there is that sort of, it gives her, as you've talked about, this sort of unhinged quality and this quite masculine quality, and that she's not a Mary Sue type because she's given up certain aspects of her personality that were positive in certain ways in the first film, but she's had to sort of give up on those things in order to prepare herself for what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's a believable thing, that you could sacrifice and build yourself towards that. And you could see, obviously, the actress Linda done this, because it wasn't any kind of rubber bodysuit there. You know, she'd done the work to make the role believable. While Amelia just looked like a small feminine woman. There was nothing physically intimidating about her like Linda could be. And that's a fault with the actress and the casting.
That's right. This is very much the problem with the modern Mary Sue, in that they want the modern Mary Sue to actually look attractive to men and to be very feminine, but at the same time be tough. Well, I'm afraid you can't have both, because if you have a tough woman, then they generally have to train extremely hard to be like that. And develop muscles.
And they probably don't spend
sometimes
2 hours every day doing their hair and makeup to appear before the Terminator.
Well, exactly. They tend to be of a sort of butch type. I don't want to disparage the LGBT community. Of course I don't. But they will generally have a certain sexual persuasion, shall we say.
And of course, there was plenty, especially before all that started becoming a thing in the media, there was plenty of women who weren't obsessed about these things, and were more practical, in the past, before we had this umbrella to drag them under.
But it's interesting, actually, as well, with the parallel between Sigourney Weaver in the Alien films and Sarah Connor, in that in the first Alien film, Sigourney Weaver, Ripley, she's very feminine, but then becomes exactly that kind of Sarah Connor figure in the second film.
Yeah, it's just the same transition we see with a lot of these series. It's a sort of like a series rot, where as they go on, the characters seem to just degrade and change. I guess that's a sign of the times, because all these series also that come to mind, they're all filmed about the same time, with sequels appearing with the same sort of space and pacing. So I suppose that's what we're seeing, the milestones of the cultural shift in the industry.
Yeah. But actually, as well, Aliens, Alien 2, is also shot by Cameron, isn't it? He's the director on that.
That's right, yeah.
So very much he's copying Ripley and transposing that figure onto the character of Sarah Connor, I think.
True. And he's also got, what's her name again? The Mexican chick, the one that looks like the man that wears the Rambo headband. He kind of makes her a bit of a butch female character, I would say. That kind of offsets Sigourney Weaver, because after the end of the day, Sigourney Weaver's the one that survives. She lives, and she's not a soldier by any means. But this woman in the platoon of Marines or whatever they are, she is a woman, and she dies pretty quickly into it. So in many ways, I still think he probably does have this idea that these strong women really do exist, and they can be soldiers too.
Well, I mean, there are female soldiers, that's
Well,
fact.
absolutely, but they're not going to go up against aliens.
No,
not that aliens exist. But
well, they do.
Maybe they do, yeah, but not like the ones.
But
in the movies.
They tend to come from Mexico and jump over the border.
Yeah.
But which makes it ridiculous to have Mexicans in your army to try to control that. But anyway, I've gone completely abstract here. But anyway,
Back to Genesis.
yes, back to Genisys.
The
You really want to get this
sentimentality
rant out there.
and the saccharine sweet sentimentality in this was awful. You had Pops the robot, so the degradation's gone from the stone cold killer, the character you would compare to like Jason or Michael Myers, has now become friendly Pops, who speaks more and more human-like. He holds on to children's drawings and stuff and pins them in the wall because he's feeling lonely. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, in this film, isn't it? This film where they sort of steal the Lost in Space soundtrack and everything, because they seem to have stolen Robbie the Robot as well.
It just hit the new lows. They also threw in so many references to the previous films, especially 1 and 2, and it was obviously a desperate bid to try and claw back an audience. But the trouble was, the first one especially got the audience because it was original and it was good. You're not going to get the audience back and appreciate it just by pandering with a few scenes like this one did. Look, we've copied shot for shot the scene when Kyle Reese came in, but with a twist, we've copied this bit, copied that bit, and then they've thrown it onto this big pile of shit as if somehow that's going to make up for it. Very cynical, I think, move to try and claw back the audience, because I know the fans were outraged over where the series went.
Yeah.
And let's not forget that the absolute garbage, pet hate, gotcha ending. Fuck off, whoever wrote that. I hope you feel ashamed of yourself and that they don't write any sequel that connects that, and it just hangs there absolutely shamefully, and everybody sees what a rotten gotcha ending, like, oh, come and see the sequel in a few years. The robot isn't gone yet. Absolutely awful. So cynical. I can't wait
to see what you're going to say about episode 4.
Oh,
there's venom in your voice already. This is going to be passionate.
Absolutely detest this film. It's a cash grab, cynical from start to finish.
What's more heavy in your mind, your love for the first one or your hatred for this one?
Oh, definitely. The love for the first outweighs it, because even knowing that all this crap would come after, I wouldn't touch or stop the first one happening. Nothing would, no amount of crap coming after can taint the first one, because it still always will be a good film, no matter what they do with their cynical rubbish later.
I think it ends when Linda Hamilton presses that button and crushes the Terminator. That's where it should have ended.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about these films is, I never saw Genisys until recently for this. So that's exactly what you can do. You can just say, there was one Terminator film that was great, and that's all I need. Same with the Alien series. You can just ignore all the crap that came later on, and you can just watch maybe the first 2 and enjoy that and forget about all that terrible stuff that came after.
In saying that, you know what you want to do?
Have a good rant about the other ones.
Yeah. Everyone at home listening is wanting this to happen, so let's do it.
Number 4 then, shall we go on to?
Yes, number 4.
Let's do it.
Number 4. Let's just point out that the first bullet point I have for number 4 in my notes is just the words, utter dog shit. That is what I think of this film. It's the worst film in the whole series. First of all, I don't even think it is actually a Terminator film. It has robots in it, but it's not a Terminator film. It's an action film with robots. Because the key thing about all the Terminator films and the series and all the rest of the franchise is that you're in the present, and a robot menace comes from elsewhere into your present domain that you're familiar with. This film isn't set at all in the present. The only thing you have is the completely superfluous intro where the guy gets sent off to the death chamber. Well, that was pointless anyway. And other than that, it's all set in this ridiculous future, which makes no sense whatsoever, with all these ridiculous things like the whole death camp thing. You think, well, what's the point in that anyway? Why would the robots round you up with this giant claw robot? Well, that's the thing. Let's get onto the giant claw. I've noticed in this giant claw robot, the kidnapping robot with the giant claws, it's like 3 stories high. First of all, ludicrous. Second of all, it has motorcycles for kneecaps. Why? Why would you build a giant robot that has motorcycles that spin off its knees and then chase people? It's a ridiculous robot with ridiculous robot knees. And then it rides on top of, I'm not joking, it rides on top of this flying transport that kidnaps like a dozen people at a time and then flies off twirling its mustache. It rides this giant thing. Like, how the fuck does that even fly anyway? Because that robot, the way it moved, weighed like 1,000,000 tons. You cannot fly that about. But why would a robot build a walking giant clawed robot to kidnap people into a flying vehicle that has motorcycles for knees?
Yeah, it has all these almost death camp type.
Yeah, that's it. The whole death
Auschwitz
camp where
type
they,
places.
yeah, they kidnap them, travel them miles, and then put them in these chambers and shove them along and do this. They would just spray them with bullets. What in the first
And they
film?
just-
What
they just
happened?
kill them.
Yeah, in the first film, okay, they mentioned camps, but you could kind of imagine they made it. It was obvious what it's alluding to with the way the barcode and so on and the rest. But at least you could say, well, it was made vague enough that early on in the war, maybe they did force people to comply. Whatever, it was so quickly mentioned, you get away with it. But in this film, because it's set in that time, they're now stuck with the problem. They have to explain everything about that world and make it logical. While Kyle Reese in the first one was an unreliable narrator, he's just talking about memories and things that happened to him, and you see a flashback in a dream. So you get away with it. It's fine. You don't explain too much because you can't possibly explain a complete future world and make it realistic in that time. So instead they end up with this absolute garbage. Absolute garbage that just doesn't work.
You get that in a few of the films about the robots rounding people up and then sending them to camps for extermination.
They just spray them with bullets. That's what
Just run them over with that giant fucking robot.
Why would you round people up and send them to camps, to transport them, in various places or whatever, to then kill them? Why don't you just kill them there and then?
And just for everyone at home listening, we are specifically talking about the Terminator movies.
Yes, the Terminator, a fictional series.
We're not talking about anything historical here.
Anything.
Bear in mind, anything historical, particularly not between the periods of, say, I don't know, 1933 and 1945. We wouldn't be talking about that at all. So just bear that in mind.
Definitely
We're
robots. We're
giant
talking about
robots
Terminators.
with motorbike kneecaps.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, this film
you're right,
introduces a magical kid again of a certain persuasion, because that's another stereotype. You've got the kid, which is otherwise useless, but can somehow magically sense when Terminators are coming. It's a stupid addition that wasn't needed. Why did you have the kid at all as a character? It was completely pointless.
Like special powers, like psychic.
Yeah, the kid could sense Terminators. That was explained by Kyle. Oh, she can sense Terminators coming, and of course it makes it even more of a stereotype in the modern Hollywood sense. In fact, it's a black kid, so you get the magical Negro aspect coming in.
In fairness, I can sense a Terminator coming on a Sunday morning when I've been out for a pint on a Saturday night.
Well, there.
I don't think she's allowed a pint. She looked about 8 or something. I don't know.
How come all these films, though, whenever there's a black kid, they always have some magical psychic powers, like The Shining, this thing. I mean, it's just little black kids have got these supernatural abilities to do amazing things.
They could have easily just made her competent, and that would have been enough to make it a good character.
In fairness, I've known quite a few black kids who can make household electrical items disappear very quickly.
Yeah. TVs, mobile phones.
So, they do exist, these incredible characters in the black community.
Well, I'm picking at the terrible parts of this film as well. You had things like, remember the magnetic mine scene where Marcus walks through the minefield and oh, surprise, surprise, the thing that was obvious from the very first opening act, the fact that he's actually part robot. We all knew that from the start, so I don't know why they bothered teasing it all the way along, because they just gave it away right at the start.
Yeah, it was bloody obvious, wasn't it?
Yeah, and especially as he's signing up for this, at the start, that whole act actually shouldn't have happened. What should have just happened was he came out, screamed, and he thought, oh, it must have been one of the prisoners, because they show you prisoners in that underground facility. So if they'd left it ambiguous, it would have been a surprise. But instead they just telegraphed it, because nowadays they think every person in the audience is completely retarded and won't understand even something that obvious. But they had a magnetic mine which sets off on him. Now I thought, wait a minute, so this is the ultimate infiltration robot, and Skynet hasn't worked out how to use stainless steel that doesn't work with a magnet, or this titanium. And in some of the films, they describe these robots as having titanium frames, which, here's a big clue, won't stick to a fucking magnet. So Skynet made this ultimate cyborg and couldn't work out how to avoid a magnet.
Yeah. They can time travel as well, remember
Yeah,
this.
it can build a time machine, but it can't work out how to avoid a magnet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It can actually manipulate time and space itself.
Yeah.
But it can't figure out basic fucking things which most people would know about.
Yeah. I mean,
Of course, I didn't know until you told me that you can't stick a magnet to titanium, but I do know that now.
Non-ferrous
I'll
metals.
Skynet in 20 years' time.
And still hasn't worked it out by T5 either.
Yeah, so this Skynet, which is meant to be this genius, is actually completely retarded. Also, they show once again that Skynet gets emotional at various points, taunting and getting angry at other things when it gets goaded, which it's a terrible writing. It was Skynet was meant to be this. It's meant to be sinister and disturbing because it's this cold AI machine. It's not meant to be coming up with a human face and goading and doing all sorts of things that don't make any logical sense, because surely an AI, if anything, should have some logic to it.
Is it like the word is it anthropomorphizing? Like trying
Yeah, an excuse to get
onto something. Yeah,
an excuse to get an actress in to was it that Bonham Carter to portray it.
all right.
It was all right. Well, actually, her character was pointless from start to finish. She shouldn't have been in that first act. Shouldn't have been there, so she wouldn't have been in it. And they shouldn't have had a human face on Skynet at all. So she was actually pointless in the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
Completely. What else have we got? We've got the Blair Williams, the pilot character, who flirts with Marcus, so you're getting a bit of the interracial relationship building up there, who, after being rescued from the crashed plane, he cuts her down and helps her down. It starts raining, and she turns to him and says, "Oh, go and look for something for a fire." Now, for some reason, there's these fires just coming up from the ground, and you think, well, what about that fucking fire right there in front of you, hen?
Yeah, just sit next to it.
Yeah, there's just sitting next to that huge fire that has no source of fuel, no ignition source. It's raining, it's absolute torrents, and there's one fire, I counted it was 3 fires dotted, obviously meant to be atmospheric lighting, but it's obviously a gas lamp underneath, just pumping up gas flames, because there's nothing burning. It's just sitting in the mud. There's just flames coming out the mud, the wet mud for some reason, and she's asking him to look for a fire. I'd say, go sit next to that, you lazy bitch. I'm not gathering up in this rain. And then what makes it worse is he goes off like an absolute numpty to get whatever. I don't know what he's going to burn, because there's no trees, remember, in this whole thing. There's no nature at all, in fact, in this. So what he's going to burn in the absolute soaking rain, I don't know, but he wanders off and doesn't actually come back with any firewood anyway later. And she thinks, well, now he's wandered off on alone, an experienced combat pilot in a hellscape that I must have grown up with my age, and there's all these robots and bandits about. So what I'll do is I'll drop my gun, undress, and get my ditties out in the rain, which is what she immediately does. She immediately starts rinsing her tits in this makeshift well. Why?
Then looking seductively at him.
Yeah, and looking seductive at him. And oh, surprise, surprise, bandits come out of nowhere 2 seconds later while she's still naked, half naked. Yeah. It's such a stupid scene. I mean, this is meant to be a combat veteran who should be as paranoid about infiltration robots that literally want to exterminate every human that exists. And she's getting her tits out and rinsing them for no reason at all. Well, is that what you do immediately after a plane crash? She's like, oh, fuck, I better go and rinse my tits now. Yeah. Is that top priority? Yeah. Fuck, my tits are dirty.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing as well, and a question really about the entire franchise is why do the robots not destroy every last vestige of vegetation and so
exactly
on?
What I was thinking. Wouldn't it just spray poison, pump it into the air non-stop, day one? It would find any kind of poisons, toxins, whatever it could find, destroy it. It would burn all the woods down, it would poison the seas, and then just wait. Mm-hmm. Just wait, and it would. And that, if the humans didn't die, they would have to hide in bunkers till the surprise ran out.
Yep.
It would just do scorched earth, because to the robot, all of it's meaningless.
Yeah.
Which is the problem when they try and show the war and the setting itself. If they keep it vague, it's up to our imagination. You can argue over it. It doesn't matter.
And this is very simple stuff because, I mean, going back to the War of the Worlds even, which H.G. Wells wrote right at the back end of the 19th century, he realized that the Martians would want to create a very different atmosphere and so on to the ones that we have. And so they released the red weed, which takes over all the vegetation and all the, the flora and fauna and everything. And this is probably the most horrific part of the novel for me, which got missed out on the 1953 version of the film. But this idea that if some external, whatever it is, an alien or robotic life form or whatever, wanted to exterminate the human race, they would simply transform the landscape and the air and everything.
Which is what you actually do to get rid of a lot of pests. A lot of pests that bother a building, be it domestic or commercial, whatever, or a farm. You actually change the environment to stop the pests from breeding.
That's right.
You get rid of dampness and a lot of things vanish.
Yeah. And this has not occurred to someone a century later making a film.
Which is sad when you think you're talking about a pretty famous work.
Yeah, I've never really rated the whole franchise simply because there's an internal logic that fails.
But it got away with it in the first because you didn't know the war itself. It was so vague. You didn't know exactly the scale of it. Maybe it was localized. It could have done all sorts of things with it. That could have.
Well, yeah. In the first one, I had the idea, because the machines were still quite primitive.
Yeah.
That it was in the early stages of this battle between man and machine. But in the later ones, you got this idea that the machines controlled everything.
And then, oddly enough, at the same time as they made the machines more advanced looking, the skeleton robots and the hover things, they made their weapons more primitive, because in the first film they all had lasers, and yet and plasma rifles, and yet in the later films they're all using bullets, which is a bit odd.
Exactly.
So you've got a step back.
Yeah. It's bizarre, because at the same time you've got like molten metal and stuff like that, and nanotechnology.
Yeah, and the weapons they keep using are these small arms that we use now, because you see a lot you can recognise, which are completely ineffective because they spray these Terminators with round after round. You think, you wouldn't issue that to your men. You would issue them at least something that could penetrate the armour. Even if everybody had to carry some sort of high caliber rifle that at least would penetrate it, why would you give them all these small arms that you've got to rely on luck to do anything?
Yeah.
Or just give them all explosives. If that's the only thing that would hurt them, you just hand them all dynamite, whatever it took.
Yeah, well, the other thing about the molten metal robots is obviously they can leave little bits of themselves around anywhere they want, and they can reform, and they can like go off into little bits of molten metal here, there, and everywhere, and regroup later, and so on. Well, as soon as they see their prey, why don't they just sort of shoot themselves out into projectiles?
Yeah.
And basically spray the entire area with molten metal projectiles that fire into your guts and so on.
Yeah, well, that would make sense from their point of view. Although, I've got to wonder with that, the molten metal robots, do you think it's like blue tack after a while, they're all full of fluff and it's really uncomfortable and nasty?
I often wonder if what is that scene where he gets shot in the factory when he gets covered in the liquid nitrogen and freezes. What if Arnie took a spade and just took a big shovel full of his bits away? Like, would he fully form? Like, would he be missing a hand or something like that?
It might just be a bit smaller.
Yeah, like a foot shorter.
Yeah. You probably have to have
wee man.
Peter. You'd have like Peter Dinklage playing him or something like that.
Yeah.
Can't make a sword hand. You can only sort of make a knife hand now.
Yeah.
Or a Jeremy Beadle hand. We're getting into bad territory now.
Yeah, we've definitely lost 5 subscribers after this one.
Oh, there's a couple other real howlers in this film I've got to cover as well, because I wrote these notes.
Go on.
The part where you've got the band of kids along with Marcus, you've got the kind of teenage Kyle and the magical kid. They go into that 7-Eleven, nice bit of product placement again, into the 7-Eleven, and the way he knows people are there is he looks round and sees a bottle of milk that's been drunk and there's the milk running down the side. I thought, there's milkmen in the post-apocalyptic future. Where do Where are these people hiding in their milk floats? Apparently, it's the most secure industry in the world because there's still going to be milkmen after a nuclear holocaust. There's underground cows.
I can answer this.
Oh.
They have Terminator cows.
Oh. I mean, imagine who wrote this.
They go in as cows. They lull people into a false sense of security and try to kill them. But some have been managed to have been captured and then milked.
It's a T-1000 in the shape of a cow. They reprogram it.
Yeah.
And just milk it.
Yeah.
And it's got Arnie's
exactly.
face.
And they must have done that as well with some of them to make them into bakers, because I also noticed there was Twinkies still in the packet. And I thought, where are they getting these Twinkies from? Nicely packeted, sealed, just like you would buy in the shops now, wee cake bars.
Again, these are not real Twinkies. They're molten metal. They're molten metal assimilated forms of Twinkies that are in fact little robots.
So in fact,
of them.
All the heroes in this are actually dead because they consumed some of this. So that's the real gotcha.
What it is, they're trying to kill the children off with these little molten metal Twinkies.
You've already written a better version than they have.
I don't think any of us would ever be allowed to make a movie in Hollywood.
There's another bit as well.
These guys are fucking finding too many plot holes.
There's another bit here as well. It's a real stinker. When they find out Marcus is a robot, what's their first reaction? They hit him in the head with a rifle butt. And I thought, really? They think he's like the Terminator that we remember from several films before, and they think, hit him in the head with a rifle butt, that'll stop him.
Unconscious.
Yeah, knock him unconscious. What? Did they not watch Terminator 1 and 2? Arnie get hit with a truck, and he just reaches in and turns the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So that's a bit just lunacy. Just wrote that in. They never even watched the first films before they wrote this one. Also, when Blair Williams, the pilot again, she rescues him, he's chained up, and she whips out one of those wee creme brulee type torches you use in the kitchen and cuts through iron chains with it. No, she could toast the top of his pudding, but she's not going to cut through iron chains with a creme brulee torch.
No.
Never mind, again.
Where'd she get the gas from it?
Yeah, where's she getting the gas and the wee brand new torches from? Unless it's another T-1000.
Yeah. Remember, these people went back in time, folks.
Yeah, they went back in time. And what it is they went back in time and stole vast amounts of milk, Twinkies, and creme brulee torches and transported them back to here. Because as we saw, and as we saw in the fifth film, they can make a rudimentary time machine somehow in the past. So that must have been what they were doing.
I've got the answer for all this, and that is that John Connor is Bruce Wayne.
It could be, yeah.
And has unlimited access to loads and loads of stuff, being a multi-millionaire philanthropist and so on.
It's a possibility. It probably would make more sense if that was the fucking storyline.
And we could have seen the pre-apocalypse. We could have seen like newspapers blowing about. Insane billionaire orders 20 million pints of milk.
And fucking Stephen Hawking was the prototype of it all.
And they're all hiding out in the Batcave, of course.
Yeah.
That's it.
The only thing that's missing is Christian Bale donning the bat cape
and a giant gorilla called King Kong. Throw that in there as well, just in case.
Why not? Also, this film did nobble a few things from the TV series, which I noticed. The submarine command, that with they've got the particularly diverse general staff.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Batman TV series.
No, the Terminator one.
Oh no, I've lost interest now.
Well, I'm not surprised, but actually, I would say the TV series, if you just take it as an inspired by, it's not a continuity, which actually is how they actually handled it. Really, it was a sort of inspired by. It's not bad. It's not great. It's not bad. If you're a Terminator fan, you'd probably enjoy it. And it kind of, but then they cancelled it just as it got interesting, as they always do. But it's not too bad, really. I mean, it's obviously it's got the usual crap politics, it's got the usual crap this, that, and the other. So you kind of take it with a pinch of salt, whatever you see in it. But they did pillage some of the ideas for this film from the TV series, I'm pretty sure. Which was
Right.
actually better than the film anyway. I mean, it's not that it's a high bar to reach.
I think I might give it a watch. I haven't got much hope, to be honest with you.
It's not.
I mean, if I don't even like Terminator 2, there's probably not much hope that I'll like that.
Just don't see it as a Terminator film, as odd as it is. That's what
Right.
I think to do it. Just see it as a TV series that happens to involve time traveling robots, you know, and
That's all I need.
yeah, and then you can kind of go along with it. And because it's a TV series with different writers for different episodes, you'll get a bum episode, and you'll get a good one, and so on. You'll see some clever stuff and some genuinely creepy moments, like the Terminator character that this time is sent back. Not Arnie for a change. And they actually make it a wee kind of waif of a lass, which is actually quite a good idea as an infiltration robot. And they actually make her quite creepy in a lot of ways, which is well done, because she's not obviously physically intimidating, so they make her quite creepy in other ways, the character at certain moments, because she seems... You might think, oh, she seems innocent and trustworthy one moment, and then maybe she'll lie, and the idea of a robot lying is quite disturbing.
Yeah, that's quite creepy. Yeah.
And she'll
I
do it
just
with a
wish they could do
smile
something
and be
more
a
interesting with the rest of the movies. They had a lot of potential.
Yeah,
I think
that's where I think the TV series did stuff better than the films, is because it was actually risked exploring some of these things better. And you think, if you have that TV series to pillage from, that nothing wrong with that, pillaging for the ideas, 'cause it's all part of the same franchise, but they didn't even do it very well. The only thing they really took from it was some of the ideas of the future, how the command was set up and what the state of the world was like. And then they just sort of did it very superficially, even at that. So it's a real stinker, number 4, and I'd say the series was actually better. And the fans liked it, which I suppose that's telling as well. The fans hated the 4 and 5, and I don't think they liked 3 either. It seems to be 1 and 2 they really liked, but they also seem to like the TV series.
I might give it a watch then.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest. I mean, it's nothing compared to some of the best stuff we've maybe looked at, but I would say it was pretty decent. Just don't see it as a continuation of the first or second, for goodness sake, because there'll be things that might annoy you. Just see it as another TV series that obviously that it's not going to be 18 rated or something, but it gets some surprising, disturbing bits in it.
Right. So your advice to people is basically stick with Terminator 1 and 2 in the series then?
Yeah, if you're a fan of the series, if you just want a really good film, the first one, and that's about it. The second, you can watch if you're a fan, or you want a kind of half-decent film. 1, 2 in the series if you're a fan. Or you just really like sci-fi series, watch the series.
Yeah, as I say, for me, the first one is good. I wouldn't call it a great film, but I'd call it a good film. It's a film that I can watch every so often. The rest, yeah, not really.
And I just really like the first one, and the rest can go and fuck off where all I'm concerned.
I'm just glad I had my therapy ranting about these films, because having watched them, I was scarred. I needed to get these scars out in the open.
I mean, I didn't mind Salvation, but I didn't like it.
Don't say that now.
No, but if you, just for the robot fighting and stuff like that was pretty cool. But you're right, it was a dire hindsight. But it was better than 2, 3, 4, and I don't know how many is there now. What was count?
Too many.
There
are 5, and we're going to have number 6 later this year. So strangely, I mean, if you look at the budgets got incredibly astronomical as time went on. But yet the first Terminator film had a budget of 6.4 million.
Oh.
And made, about 12 times the budget back.
It's probably so much more now when you think of DVD sales, Netflix, and all these other things now.
That's right. I mean, we're just talking about the box office here. But apparently the whole franchise has made over $3 billion. But I would imagine that that's rather to do with merchandising and so on, as well as. Yeah. Because the films that followed, well, I mean, Terminator 2 was a success, obviously. But aside from Terminator 2, they've not really made that much back. And in fact, I mean, the third Terminator, Rise of the Machines, a lot of money was lost simply because they had to persuade Arnold Schwarzenegger to come back and reprise his role, because James Cameron, he abandoned the film And Linda Hamilton was not happy because she was just getting a very tiny role in the film, really a cameo. And so the only thing they could hang it on was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so he had to be bribed, more or less, with, what was it, $29 million for his
Remember, it was
role.
famously
Plus,
huge.
yeah, plus a 20% share in the profits.
Oh, wow.
So he
really,
probably
they
made
must have not
about
made much.
No, so he probably made about 50 million for his own pocket, but the rest of the film didn't really make that much back.
Especially as I remember hearing that the average people think that if a film costs 100 million, it makes 101. It's in profit, but it's not at all. You've actually got to make something. I remember getting told it was something like 2 or 3 times at least before you're in profit, because you've also got to take into account post-production work, advertising, and so on. All of that costs vast amounts for something like this. You know, this isn't just a wee indie film that's released in the hope and word of mouth.
That's right, and then of course all the cinema releases want their cuts and so on.
So in fact, if they make 200 million on a 100 million budget for a big film like this, they actually probably lost a lot of money.
Yeah, so I think it was probably really the merchandising that made a lot of the money back. And I think that's probably why, particularly beginning with Terminator 2, they realized that they had to make things cool. And so you got things like Arnold Schwarzenegger wearing sunglasses a lot. Of course, in the first film, he wears sunglasses for a reason. But after that, in Terminator 2 and beyond, the sunglasses are really simply there to make him look cool. And the same with the motorbike and so on. All these things are to make sort of cool, iconic imagery to sell posters and things like that.
Yeah, and the leather jacket and the Harley boots and stuff like that, and the sleek back hairdo.
When you look at his outfit in the first one, the one he steals, it's actually kind of awful. It's kind of raggy punk thing.
Yeah.
It's not a very nice coat at all. But then later on, it becomes this iconic leather thing. That's what they keep they keep showing him in over and over again. This leather outfit, because as Dave said, it's cooler.
Who did he steal that off of? Where did he get that second outfit? Like what biker did he kill for that?
James Dean.
Yeah.
who had just
obviously
just come out of competing, to everybody's surprise, at a Mr. Universe competition and won for Arnie to be able to wear it.
Yeah. That's what he's been doing since the 1950s, you know, James Dean has been competing in bodybuilding contests.
Trying to match Arnie.
No, but I mean, really, that whole iconic imagery was stolen off James Dean and Marlon Brando, off the iconic images that they had from things like, you know, their films like Roll Without a Cause and On the Waterfront and so on, Streetcar Named Desire. And they were taking that sort of iconic imagery from the 50s and 60s and repackaging it.
Mm-hmm. Because remember, you had Fonzie as well. He was famous for wearing a leather jacket. He had the T-Birds from Greece. That was a couple of years before. They all leather jackets. Like, if you had a leather jacket, you were a cool dude. But in this one, this guy's killing you, and he's a robot, and he's got sunglasses. Is this guy cool, or is he a psychotic robot? Well, he wouldn't be a psychotic robot because he's a robot. But they, put him in a leather jacket. But in the second one, like you said, sunglasses, big knee-high boots, and a leather trousers, cool Harley, shotgun on the side.
Starts wisecracking. You got the wisecracking from him as well.
Hugging John, smiling, being dad. They just like, give me a break.
Well, you compare those iconic photographs of James Dean and of Marlon Brando on the motorbikes, and you compare them with Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2 on that. There is definitely a sense that these iconic images are being recycled, and they're being recycled really for marketing and for selling posters and stuff like that.
Yeah, because remember, in the movie poster for the first one is Arnold, obviously a painted version of him with the red background, like the lasers, and his like glowing red eye through the sunglasses. The poster for the second one is him sitting on a motorbike.
Yeah, that's right. But it's interesting in that, I mean, these are almost archetypes of masculinity, these poses. And so, although they've started selling feminism and stuff like that, these archetypes of masculinity are actually still what people want deep down, and what people invest in, and what people want up on their walls, what young men, like to look at and everything. Not in a gay way. Let's be honest. In a sort of a role model way, if you see what I mean. And equally, of course, the robot image distances yourself from almost that homoeroticism and so on that you could get associated with. So it does actually even improve on the 50s and 60s aesthetics. Well, what's interesting is looking from our perspective, if we want to get into filmmaking and also selling our brand of politics and everything, is to actually look at these things and to look at how you actually sell an idea through coolness. Because an idea doesn't just sell itself, even if it's the most logical idea in the world. It sells itself through iconography.
Just put a pair of sunglasses on it.
Yeah, pretty much so. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Like it or lump it, and you might think it's crazy and so on, but that actually does work. And does anyone have anything else to add?
Don't watch Terminator 4, whatever you do, folks.
So that's a good message to leave it on, I think, then. So goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Hope to see you next time. Remember to subscribe, of course, just before YouTube unsubscribes you. Bye for now.